Good morning, church. It is good to come here again, and usually I preach once a month. Sometimes, when I'm on no pay leave, then might be sometimes twice a month. That will be the situation after the mission conference next week. Then most likely I have to come back on November. Okay, but anyway, today starts the 10th sermon on the minor prophets. I don't know whether you have visited Chicago. I graduated from a Bible college in Hong Kong in 1977. Then in that summer, I start to enroll myself into a master program in a seminary in one of the suburbs of Chicago called Deerfield, Illinois. And then I studied 2 years there before I went back and get married, and then went back to Chicago and then spent another 4 years, start my first ministry there. So I have lived in Chicago for 6 years. They call Chicago the second city because it used to be, most likely not anymore, to be the second largest city in the States after New York. And they also call Chicago the windy city. It's kind of windy many times. However, when you think of Chicago, I'm sure that, most likely the first person that you think about Chicago is Michael Jordan from the Chicago Bulls, one of the arguably best basketball player in the States. And or might be, when you think of Chicago, you think of University of Chicago or Northwestern universities. As good as Stanford, Harvard, okay? So that's what you think about Chicago. Or maybe you think about, the crime in Chicago, okay? The Untouchables, right? If you remember that movie. But to me, Chicago means another thing. Oops, let me see. Besides, I start my ministry there, and actually my first 4 years of marriage, I spent in Chicago. To me, it is one of my spiritual nourishing center. While I start my ministry in Chicago. Besides, there are so many seminaries, around the suburb of Chicago. One of the famous Bible school in Chicago is the Moody Bible Institute. The Moody Bible Institute arguably is more in Chicago. Has over, 150 years of history. And every year they have this pastor conference that I like to go to. They invite, prominent speakers like Chuck Swindoll, right? Who wrote a lot of books to preach. And that's my first time that I got a chance to hear Chuck Swindoll preach in person. So I heard many great preachers, teachers, professors from Moody Bible Institute events. But I tell you, one of the person that give me a lasting memory is not Chuck Swindoll, but a black preacher called E.V. Hill. Of course, he passed away. Edward Victor Hill. And I did not recall anything he said, but I still vividly remember the title of his sermon. The title of his sermon is 456. And then he explained, when he came up to the podium, he said, folks, in his metallic, energetic, soul voice, black preachers have a way to engage the preachers, engage the audience. And he said, last year when I came here, I preached on 1, 2, 3. That's why this year I preach on 4, 5, 6. You guys better invite me to come back next year and I'll preach, 7, 8, 9. And I forgot what he preached on. Okay, yeah. So I'm using this title, 1, 2, 3, to preach from the book of Haggai. Someone said, there's a difference between a spider and a bee and an ant. A spider basically spins things out of its own, but it's kind of weak. The web is quite weak, right? I'm sure that you encounter many spider webs and then you just tear it off, right? A bee kind of take things from many flowers and make something out of its own, like honey. No, I am not a spider because I don't create anything. I am not as diligent as a bee, but I might be an ant trying to steal things out from different places and then claim it is my own. So allow me to steal 1, 2, 3 and talk about the book of Haggai. What is one? One prophet. Now you said that of course it's one prophet, okay? You can say to any prophet it's one prophet. But mind you, interestingly enough, that in the whole Bible, there is only one Haggai, versus there are 4 Zechariah and 5 Joel. One prophet, one and only one prophet called Haggai. Besides the things that he talked about in his book, we can find Haggai, the same Haggai, from Ezra chapter 5 verse 1 and chapter 6 verse 14. And very interesting, when we look at the book of Haggai, the prophet, the designated title, the prophet, was mentioned many times as prophet. And not only that, it was also mentioned as the Lord's messenger. And also, the prophetic oracle, the prophetic declaration was many times mentioned as, this is what the Lord Almighty says. So this guy, this one and only Haggai, really has some authority when he declared the decrees, when he declared the will of God. He knew what he was talking about. He knew exactly why he was a prophet. So it's very interesting. Prophet. Now, of course, the name Haggai means festival. So someone said, well, maybe he was born in a certain Jewish feast or festival. So that's why this name was given to him by his parents. Not only that, we really did not know too much of his background. Unlike, you still remember Zephaniah? Zephaniah was the great-grandson of King Hezekiah, right? But we did not know anything about the forefathers, about the father of Haggai. Specifically and uniquely, openly, while he started his book, he declared what the Lord wants him to say. No duplication and no repeated words. So interesting. This is a very interesting prophet. Now, of course, we can talk about a lot about the different prophets. But if I can make this, oversimplification of the Old Testament times. Now, of course, there will be a lot of arguments about the duration of the different periods. But let's just separate it into a few 400 years period. So starting from Exodus, or after Exodus, when Joshua led the Jewish people to conquer the land of Canaan. By the way, there were many Canaanites there already. So who really claimed the ownership of that piece of land which led to the Arabic world against Israel nation, which led to the now we all really are concerned about the Israel and Palestinian war. Who really know who owned the land first? The Palestinians claim that, even before Joshua, we were there. Okay? Of course, the Israel claimed that this is our promised land. So, I don't want to argue and also want to give my stance towards that positions because the whole world is now in confusion. Who really is right? Okay? But anyway, 400 years, 400 years, 400 years, and 400 years. So from Joshua to 2 Chronicles. And then during the reign of the kingdom of Israel as well as Judah, many prophets came out and then start to prophesy. Now, of course, we can classify them as prophets that have their message direct towards the Israelites or the Israel kingdom or to the Judah kingdom. However, this classification is not quite right because some of them, like Jonah, actually preached to Nineveh. Also Nahum and also Obadiah preached to Edom. So it is hard to just classify them according to the people they address. So one of the ways to classify them is classify them as major and minor prophets. And what are major prophets? What are minor prophets? Major and minor are based on the size of the books and not on the significance of his message. So there were 12 minor prophets, and I have covered 9 with them this year. And today, we talk about Haggai. There are 4 major prophets: Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and Daniel. So for the prophets, all prophets, whether they are major or minor, they are designated according to the length of their writings. Does not apply to their faith, obedience on what they did is more or less important because they are listed as major or minor. So God told the prophets, then the prophet told the people, then the prophecy happened. Now that's one way to classify them. However, I think a better way or another way to classify them is to classify them according to the captivity of the people, especially the captivity of the people to Babylon. So we can classify them in 3 periods: the pre-exilic, the exilic, or the post-exilic. Pre-exilic include those prophets like Obadiah to Habakkuk. The exilic include prophets like Daniel and Ezekiel. And Haggai, Zechariah, and Malachi, they are the post-exilic prophets. And all of them, all 3 of them, are minor prophets. So this one prophet, interesting. If we compare Haggai and Zechariah, which I'm going to talk about next time, Haggai and Zechariah, actually they cooperate, they collaborate together to bring the message to the Jewish people at that time during the post-exilic period, meaning that many Jews returned back to Jerusalem. After they returned back to Jerusalem, they still need prophetic oracles. They still need the will of God to tell them what they should do. So this prophet worked closely with Zechariah. Haggai and Zechariah work closely together. All right. So 1, 2. So what is 2? 2 chapters. 2 chapters. If you look at these 2 chapters, there are many phrases that occurs. Like, for example, be strong. This is a phrase that always will occur. Give careful to your ways. Consider, think, or rethink. Why you guys were in such a situation? Think. Give careful to your ways. And basically, if you look at the 2 chapters, less than 100 verses, in this book, it talks about at least 10 times about the word, the Lord's house. The Lord's house, the temple of the Lord. 8 times when it talks about the Lord's house referred to the temple. Why? Why it refers so much to the temple? That's exactly the content of this book. The content of this book was to encourage the people that went back to Jerusalem to continue to rebuild the temple, to continue their work that they or their fathers have started 15 years ago. So if you look at this book, it consists of 4 sermons. The book of Haggai consists of 4 sermons. The first sermon, as reflected in chapter 1, talk about you guys should rebuild the temple. And then starting from chapter 2, after the temple was rebuilt, then another 3 sermons. Another 3 sermons to talk about that, hey, now you have the temple rebuilt, but continue, be careful, and consider some of the things that you should be doing. Because you have wrong perspectives, you have incomplete purity, and then lastly, always the prophets have an encouraging conclusion, have some encouraging promise to the prophet, to the priest Joshua. Now, so basically, the book of Haggai have these 4 sermons, okay? And I think that this lay out very clearly, okay? The first sermon, the second sermon, the third sermon, and the 4th sermon, from conviction, courage, cleanness to consummation, rebuke, reminder, response. Now, of course, we don't have time to talk about all these 4 sermons, okay? Yeah. By the way, okay, if you just look at this, okay, 15 verses in chapter 1, and then 23 verses in chapter 2. So those 2 chapters, only 38 verses. 38 verses, 2 chapters, 4 sermons. Aren't you glad that if Haggai come back to life and then be a preacher here, you'll be very happy, okay? Because he preached very short sermons, okay? Yeah, unlike me. Yeah, so, 4 sermons. Now, when we look at the book of Haggai, if we try to apply the book of Haggai to Pacific Grace, I worked this out, okay, and then and think of the history of Pacific Grace. Pacific Grace started 50 years ago, exactly, 1973, it starts. It became independent in 1981. That's why 2 years ago, we celebrate the 40th year independence anniversary. Still remember that? Okay? We celebrate 2 years ago, the 40th independence anniversary. We did not celebrate 40 years of inauguration of Pacific Grace. We celebrate the 40th independence. This year we should celebrate the 50th golden anniversary of inauguration of Pacific Grace. For some reason, we don't celebrate that. We celebrate independence, but that's fine. Okay, that's okay. And then as we look at, the growth of Pacific Grace for the last 20-some years, starting maybe you can count back to 1990, okay, when we first planned the church as the result of the influx of immigrants from Hong Kong. We planned a church in Burnaby, and it became independent in 6 months, financially, administratively, organizationally. And then they started a church in 1995 in Port Moody, and we, even your daughter or your son, okay, start something, so you as a parents, you should do something too. So we also start another church called Pacific Grace MB Church Southside, right, in 1995. And then together we start North Shore Pacific Grace, and then Port Moody starts Pacific Grace Mandarin Church, and then also in 2006, 17 years ago, that was the last Pacific Grace church plant. Okay? If we don't count South Hill. Right? So, it has been a while that we have been continually rebuilding the church of God. Well, maybe I shouldn't say that. Okay? We are continuously building the church of God here. Okay? But it has been a while since we planned another church. But the book of Haggai, those 2 chapters said, it is time to rebuild. After 15 years, it is time to rebuild. Your parents, or maybe you, came back 15 years ago under the command, under the decrees, under the provisions of Cyrus, the first king of Persia, who destroyed Babylon. They allow you to come back to Jerusalem. So around 50,000 people came back. Next year, you lay the foundation of the temple. But because of the Samaritans, because of the, if I could use this term, the Palestinians, okay, to put it in a more contemporary setting. Because of the Palestinians, of course, they did not want you to rebuild. So, you did not do anything. And now 15 years pass. Maybe it's time to rebuild again. Maybe it's time to really put something on the foundation that you have laid down, that your fathers have laid down. Why you did not rebuild? Why you did not involve? Why you did not continue to strive for the Lord as you have done before? Why you left your original heart? Why? Why you are so discouraged to involve in the ministry? I don't know. You have to ask yourself. And let's see the 3 excuses why the Jewish people did not rebuild. 3 excuses. Occasion not right. Opportunity not right. And the outlook not right. Why many times that we did not want to continue our ministry? Not necessarily in PG. Or continue what we think that God has asked us to do. Occasion not right. Opportunity not right. Outlook not right. In the 2nd year of King Darius, on the 1st day of the 6th month, the word of the Lord came through the prophet Haggai to Zerubbabel, son of Shealtiel, governor of Judah, and to Joshua, son of Josedek, the high priest. This is what the Lord Almighty said. These people said the time has not yet come to rebuild the Lord's house. The time has not yet come. The time has not yet come. Why so? Why the time has not yet come? Right? Well, if we look, we may know the reason, or we may understand what they think. Of course, they face a lot of adversity. They face a lot of difficulties. But basically, they feel that, hey, this is not a time yet. Recently, sorry, this is in Chinese, okay? Recently I watched an episode, okay, from the YouTube. And this episode talked about, for those who bring their elderly parents to travel with them, 60% feel that they regret that. No. Many regret, let's put it this way, many regret to bring their parents to travel with them, but yet 60% feel that they will continue to do so next time. Why? Interesting. They interviewed, a couple as well as a son. The couple bring their old parents. Actually, when I say old, it's less than 70, so I shouldn't say old, okay? Less than 70 parents to go to travel, okay? They plan all the things, they, try their best to accommodate them, and then even explain fully what's the itinerary and things like that, okay? But still a lot of troubles, okay? A lot of troubles. Of course, there are a lot of troubles because you have 4 people instead of 2. And then a son also brought their single mom, okay? His father passed away, a single mom, to travel. And that kind of travel is not, just go to Japan, but rather to many remote places. They said a lot of trouble, but yet they think the experience was worthwhile. Why the experience was worthwhile? Because they understand that their parents are getting old. They try to treasure as much time together with them as possible. They know that the occasion is right to do so, because you don't know what the future holds. But for this group of people, they can argue that time has not yet come. Why time has not yet come? Can someone press for me? Stop. Why? Because it depends on how you interpret the 70 years of return. It was prophesied by Jeremiah that after 70 years, then they would return. But there were 3 captivities, 609, 597, or 586. Yes, in a way that in 539, around 539, 70 years after the first captivity, Cyrus the Persian conquers Babylon, they were allowed to return. So that's it, all right? But on the other hand, if you count 586, the last episode of captivity, then in 70 years, that it will be 516. So if you count that way, then, they have at least 5 more years, okay, before, the prophecy of Jeremiah was completely fulfilled. And if that was the case, so why hurry? The foundation laid. Okay, let it lay for a while. We still have 20 years before we do it. And now, after 15 years, it's only when the prophets start to rebuke them and start to tell them, hey, you know why there were so many ruins in the country? You know why, the land was deserted? You know why that, you try your best to produce, but no crops was being produced from the field? You know why? Because you said that the time to rebuild, to complete the temple was not yet come. You did not grasp the time. And not only that, not only the occasion not right, the opportunity is not right. Then the word of the Lord came through the prophet Haggai. Is it a time for yourselves to living in your panel house while this house remained a ruin? So you guys are living in a panel house, but this house remains a ruin. Okay. Sorry, I may be a little bit too loud, okay? Kind of wake him up, okay? Or wake her up, okay? Sorry about that, okay? Yeah. Now, this is what the Lord Almighty said. Give careful thought to your ways. Give careful thought to your ways. This happens many times. You have planned much, but harvest little. You eat, but never have enough. You drink, but never have your fill. You put on clothes, but are not warm. You earn wages, only to put them in a purse with holes in it. Because why? Because you live in your panel house, while this house remains a ruin. One time, I forgot exactly the utensil. One utensil in my house, was a little bit old, okay? So I said to my wife, hey, this is a little bit old. Why don't we give it to the church? And then my wife rebuked me. She said, because it was old, you don't want to use it, and you now give it to the church? There are times that even pastors might do that, right? You get a new one for yourself. You give the old one to the church. You do not give the best to the Lord. You give the second best, or even the third best, or even the worst to the Lord. You build your house. Talking about building house, okay? If you haven't got a house, if you're planning to buy a house, good news and bad news. The good news is in August, okay, the housing price, just look at Vancouver, okay, the first column, okay, the first row, column or row? Row, okay. Vancouver, the average price, okay, go down from 1.21 million, drops to 1.2 million. Is it encouraging? Very encouraging, right? 1.21 to 1.2, right? That's the good news. Anyway, this is good news, okay? Continue to decline. But the bad news is, because of the interest rate, even though the house price drops, but still, in order to make a mortgage payment, your yearly annual income has to increase from 244,000 to 246,000. How many of you got yearly income 246,000? Oh, poor guys, okay, you are not going to own a house in Vancouver. And that's why people start to, instead of, owning a house, they said revengeful travel, okay? They travel, okay? They spend their money on other things. Well, after all, you could not own a house. You may as well, make yourself a little bit, more comfortable or enjoy yourself a little bit, right? Why not do that? Okay, let's do it. Okay, so you look at this place that you might want to travel. Cannot achieve one thing, you may as well do others. There's so many enemies around trying to deter us from building. So why build? We may as well panel our house. We may as well beautify our house. We may as well do something that we can do, right? We cannot, just like, many of us here, I shouldn't say that, okay? Some of the people, they cannot afford a house, so they must use the money to do other things. Opportunity not right. But most importantly, the outlook not right. This is what the Lord Almighty says. Give careful thought to your ways. Go up into the mountains and bring down timber and build my house. Do not do that. Build my house first. Don't build. Of course, it is nothing wrong to build your own house. It's okay. But still, why you were here 15 years ago? Why you came back? Why your parents came back? Not because to travel to this piece of land, but you are supposed to come back and rebuild the temple. So go to the mountains and bring down timber and build my house so that I may take pleasure in it and be honored, says the Lord. You expect much, this kind of repeat, but see, it turned out to be little. What you brought home, I blew away. Why? Declares the Lord Almighty. Because of my house, which remains a ruin, while each of you is busy with your own house. Busy with your own house. Not only build your house, but you are busy with your own house. Well, sorry if I sound a little bit rebuking. If I sound a little bit, or not blaming, but disturbing your comfort. Because that's what Haggai said to the Jewish people. On October 15, in Wellington is a large church, right? It's all packed with people to remember this guy called Rob Penner. I don't know how many of you know him, okay? I don't know him too well because I only got a chance to have a burger, a lunch, I should say, a lunch. But let me explain why I said burger later. Lunch with him in Hong Kong. At that time, when I was serving in Hong Kong in the Bible seminary, he also served there. And one of the board members of the Alliance Bible Seminary was in his church, Evangelical Community Church. Okay, he served in the Kowloon site, ECC. And then he introduced me to him and then said, hey, Pastor Chen, why don't we have lunch? And then we go to lunch, go to a very fancy place. I ate the burger, the most expensive burger I've eaten, okay, in that fancy place, okay. But anyway, and he passed away recently on October 5th, 2023, after he came back from 2020, after spending 10 years working with the migrant workers in China, specifically in Beijing. After spending a few years studying in region as a mature student and got his 2 master's degree and also got his doctorate degree later. And interesting, now this is arbitrary, okay, and then when I look through his video of his funeral, okay, I was pretty moved, okay, especially moved by the song that's sung by his I think nephew, okay.
Well, my Uncle Rob wanted me to play this song at his funeral. And I heard in later years he was becoming to be a very good harmonica player. So I'm going to play a little for him. Yakwa, you're shaking. I'm just a poor, wayfaring stranger, traveling through this world below. There is no sickness, no toil, no danger in that bright, bright land to which I go. I'm going there to see my Father and all the loved ones who gone their way before. I'm going over Jordan. I'm going to my home. Dark clouds will gather around me. I know my way is hard and steep. but beauteous fields arise before me, where God's redeemed their vigils keep. I'm going there to see my mother. She said she'd meet me when I come along. I'm going over Jordan. I'm just going to my home. I'm going there to see my father and all the loved ones who've gone this way before. I'm just going over Jordan. I'm just going to my home. I'm just going over Jordan. I'm just going to my home.
You may say, it is not the time to serve the Lord yet. The occasion not right. The time of prophecy hasn't fulfilled yet. We may say, the opportunity is not right yet. The time of prosperity, especially our own prosperity, hasn't arrived yet. We might say, outlook is not right yet. Outlook is not right yet. The time of partnership with God hasn't come yet. But it has come next week. Allow me to advertise this to you. Let's support mission. Let us pray. Our dear Father, we want to thank you for the time that we can spend together to worship you in songs, in praise, and also in your word. We want to thank you for the words of the minor prophets, especially from Haggai. Even though the first sermon is a sermon rebuking the Jewish people, asking them, telling them why and what are the excuse of not serving you, not rebuilding the temple. There's no guilt trip for us to read, to listen to this rebuke. But Lord, help us as you ask the Jewish people to think, consider their ways. Help us to know what we need to contribute to you. In Christ's name I pray. Amen.